Okay, now let me welcome everyone for joining us, especially community members. We really appreciate your time. It's good to see many of you, and welcome to those who do not know personally. But we are delighted to have you here and share a little bit about what we've been doing this semester. My name is Pavlina Cherneva. I teach this course called The Right to Employment. And I conduct research at the Lviv Economics Institute at Bard College and direct the newly formed Economic Democracy Initiative. This course really tries to put a spotlight on an idea that once helped pull us out of a depression, and that is that we can provide employment where it is needed directly, and that the public sector has a role to play in that process. And while we might not be quite experiencing the devastating consequences of the Great Depression, I think all of us are acutely aware that the labor market is not quite working for everyone, that we have just experienced a pandemic and there are many, many challenges ahead. So can we return back to that idea of employment relief, public service employment? One of the other ideas that informed this course is that job creation has all too often been used as a slogan. I mean, virtually every person who would hear about propose various policies would use job creation as a justification. Of course, that's the correct thing to do. But the question is, are we doing it right? And the typical conventional approaches don't seem to deliver enough jobs to our communities. And so few people realize the small net job creation effect through traditional kind of subsidies, contracts, training programs. As we're really trying to rethink how we can approach the unemployment problem. Now, meanwhile, the conversation is changing in Washington, and we are starting to see various pieces of legislation, bills, resolutions that are being proposed out there that deal with the problem of unemployment. We have the Federal Jobs Guarantee Resolution by Ayanna Pressley. We have the Civilian Climate Corps for Jobs and Justice, both by President Biden, but also by Senator Markey. We have Green New Deal for cities, towns, and tribal nations. And again, Green New Deal resolution, we will be seeing many others. This is just a sampling of what's coming down the pipeline. And so the basic principle that seems to be guiding these policy initiatives is that we really need the public's money to be directed to the public purpose, to public needs, to the public good. And so the students in this class asked a basic question: should these policies come to our doorstep, how would we respond? How would our communities respond? And we inverted the classroom this semester. Students took complete ownership of this project, where they started studying two communities, Kingston and Newburgh. And they spent a fair amount of time getting to know these communities. And we are grateful for the time that community leaders offered midway through the semester. They provided really useful feedback. Students made a presentation where they showed their preliminary results studying the local economy, the demographic, the current conditions, and engaged in the conversation. And today, what they would like to do is present some of their ideas of how we can move forward. Again, they will speak to why their project is different from the way traditionally the unemployment problem has been tackled. But I just want to conclude with just one idea, that businesses, and in particular, big businesses, come and go. And I think Kingston is a good example of how it once thrived because IBM was there, and how it was impacted when IBM left. Is there a way in which we can provide for economic security for our communities? What we know is that cities stay, community members, community organizations stay, municipal governments stay, and the people stay. And so could we deploy other ways in which we can generate job creation when it is needed locally? So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to open the floor to the students and they will take it away.
Hello. I again just wanted to thank you all so much for coming. We're really appreciative of you all taking time out of your busy day to come see us. So if you would go to our first slide, I want to tell you a little bit about the work our class has already done. So this past semester, like Paulina has said, our class has embarked on the beginning of what will hopefully be a long-term endeavor to creating green jobs for Kingston. We believe that no one should be stuck in involuntary unemployment. There have been other job creations in the past, but we got the opportunity to really look at Kingston specifically. We've spent the past semester trying to better understand Kingston as we surveyed the area, looking at the history and unemployment to understand who needs jobs and how we can make them. We also took a look at existing community resources as we wish to expand and potentially introduce some small-scale public programs into the city. While we have a presentation laid out for you today, we also want to think of this as a conversation. We're going to have some questions later on, and we would highly appreciate any type of feedback you have. We understand that no matter how much research we do, the community is going to have an understanding that we simply don't. So without further ado, I'd love to start talking about what we are really here to do. If you can. So our motivation for this project, above all, was putting the people at the forefront. On a broader level, we seek to find a long-term solution to ongoing involuntary unemployment, as I have said once and will probably say again. And for us, addressing unemployment doesn't just mean dropping a number, although that should be a result, but it means really looking into what that number means, putting the people first, making sure that they have the resources that they need. Like I said, we also seek to support and expand existing community resources such as nonprofits and government programs and find where the potential for new ideas is. So next slide. Could I go to the next slide? Sorry. One more back. All right. Okay, great. So first, we really want to understand why unemployment is such a big issue. At this point in time, a job is really a key to making sure that people have housing, healthcare, healthy food, and insurance that they are just generally going to be okay. Unemployment also often acts like a disease. You know, the longer a person is unemployed, the harder it can be to find a job, which we seek to address. Who is unemployed also can in many ways be seen as a direct result of structural inequity. When unemployment rates drop, we need to be asking who is left behind, or really who we need to help work the hardest for. Unemployment is often expected to fix itself and is thus ignored, and direct employment strategies are not utilized. Ultimately, we have to find a long-term solution to ongoing involuntary unemployment. So next, I'd like to tell you what is different about our approach. If we could go to the next slide. So rather than operating on the assumption that if we pour public money into private infrastructure, jobs will just come, we really want to flip the script, centering the needs of the people by directly creating those jobs. We want to use public service employment, which directly employs the people. Again, it's not funding private enterprises in the hopes of creating jobs, but creating those jobs directly. So next. Why a green jobs guarantee? A jobs guarantee would ensure that anybody who wanted a job could get one. Creating green jobs specifically can help to address pressing environmental issues which again have shown themselves to have the biggest impact on those who are already suffering the most. So we wanted to center our proposal around care work, which will be on the next slide. The name of our presentation is actually Kingston Cares. And the reason for this is we wish to create public programs of care to support Kingston. Care work can broadly be defined here as work done in the service of others. I think that one misunderstanding that I actually had going into this project is that public jobs in some way meant a type of infrastructure. It meant the building of a new road, solar panels, or a new building. And those are all projects that could create jobs. But I think it's a mistake to think that public jobs are just that building of a green road, a new road. Kingston actually already operates in a care economy. I mean, if you look, you can see that the two largest industries in Kingston are education and healthcare, with something like construction accounting for only 5.3% of employment. These are industries of care, and in our spirit of working with Kingston, we want to recognize that and expand upon those strengths. It is a mistake to rely exclusively on support services like nonprofits for care works. The public jobs we create should reflect the care economy we live in. Next slide. So in total, our vision is to use public service employment to support a care economy and address community needs primarily through food programs and city beautifications. Next slide. Our goals for this project are to create care for the community and the environment through the creation of public jobs. We've proposed a couple of our own ideas for doing this, like city beautification, working on improving housing, creating programs that provide fresh food for and by the community, as well as school food programs and composting centers. We have also included a couple of outside resources we have found. The two we mentioned in this presentation are mostly Kingston City Land Bank and Kingston Land Trust. But in our proposal, our actual proposal for later, we plan on including many others. There is already some really amazing work going on to Kingston, and we would love to support it. So just for a bit of background, there is actually a historical precedent of job creation programs in Kingston. Kingston was a beneficiary of New Deal programs like the WPA, which provided jobs to those who were unemployed. The WPA was actually a success in Kingston, employing 1,500 men and 50 women. We seek to emulate the WPA's success through our Green New Deal, but with a focus on supporting especially women and people of color, unlike the WPA. The Civilian Climate Corps and the American Jobs Plan have also put green federal job creation back on the political agenda recently and demonstrate the feasibility of measures such as ours. However, the budget for these programs is insufficient at the moment to solve the problems of unemployment and environmental degradation on their own. There's a long legacy of job creation programs throughout New York, and we would love to continue on that endeavor.
Hello, my name is Araceli, and I'm just going to give a little bit more background of unemployment in Kingston. So the graph over here shows the unemployment rate in Kingston between 1990 and 2021. And so just by like a quick brief look at it, it seems like it's very fluctuating, especially now during like these hard times of the pandemic. But in specific, the graph shown allows us to see the unemployment rate in Kingston, and the red line shows the unemployment rate for the US in comparison. So it seems pretty in tune. However, Kingston seems to be a little bit fluctuating above here. But I just wanted to talk about how some of the important takeaways from the line graph is like the sharp increase of unemployment rate during the recessions. And interestingly enough, after the departure of one of the biggest like technological companies that was like the economic engine of the 20th century for the Ulster County, which is named IBM, which happens during the years of like 1995. So we see how drastically it dropped from there, and we see that ever since like the drop in unemployment in Kingston, they haven't really been able to recover up until like just the 2010s. So something I want to say is that like throughout the history, the highest rates of unemployment in Kingston have been around 8 to 9% during 1994 and 2012, and nonetheless these are shy statistics compared to like the 2020 12% unemployment rate. It is clear that Kingston was only capable of maintaining unemployment below and around the national unemployment rate of 6.2%. However, in present day, it is evident that Kingston is in dire need of a Green New Deal for unemployment, and it is in need of a jobs guarantee, especially during these times of the pandemic. If we can move on to the next slide, I want to talk about who is affected currently. Well, not as of currently. I wanted to give a little bit more historical context. So I used data from 2011 to 2015. So just to discuss this briefly, unemployment rate in Kingston by race throughout 2011, 2015 shows us that two or more, if you are of two or more races, or if you're mixed, you face a lot of inequality in seeking employment, as the employment rate is extremely high, especially in comparison to the United States unemployment rate. And is followed by Black or African American individuals at 17%, which is extremely high and what we seek to combat. Followed by American Indian and Alaska Native at 16%. And it's also important to note that these demographics are higher than the average of the United States unemployment rate for based on their racial categories and being minorities. As you can see, Asian Americans as well. And although Latinos and Hispanics are not pictured in this graph, they definitely are one of the populations that we seek to help with um, our job guarantee program. If we can move on to the next slide, I kind of wanted to talk about unemployment rate in Kingston varied by sex. So we see here that male and female, we see that males are more greatly affected by unemployment in Kingston, especially in comparison to the US, and women seem to just be at the same level as the average US unemployment rate. However, one problem here that we noted in our proposal is that women are typically left out of the labor force. So typically they don't go registered as being part because they have to take care of their children. They can no longer work officially, and basically they're not counted in this unemployment rate. So we wanted to actually focus more on both of these demographics, and especially women, because uh, we wanted to focus on maternal health, uh, after school activities, childcare, and many more things and everything. But just to know, men's unemployment rate is at 9%, women's is at 7% as of 2015 and 2011. Moving on to the next slide, the unemployment rate in Kingston varied by age. Is It showed us that like an overwhelming majority of 16 to 19-year-olds in Kingston are unemployed, 49% to be exact. So this may be because of education and transportation issues, or simply because young adults are no longer able to work due to other circumstances, such as going away to college, moving out of their houses, just living with their parents, or focusing on their education. So this wasn't, although it was a large statistic, it wasn't as shocking. But more concerning is like 30 to 34-year-olds and 35 to 44-year-olds at an unemployment rate of 10 to 14%. So they face higher unemployment rates than the general US population as well. And this is a problem because unlike young adults, most individuals at this age have likely been in the labor force for an extended period of time and may have been terminated, laid off, or just simply cannot find employment at this time. So we also wanted to see like people above the ages of 75 years old with high unemployment. However, that is a little bit more reasonable as we see that they might be retired, or it just kind of reflects the type of demographic that is for Kingston, because unfortunately Kingston's health rate is also facing a lot of challenges. Um, if we move on to the next slide, if we look at unemployment rate in Kingston, it varied by education level. So if we look at the unemployment rate based on education, it's clear that less than high school graduates face almost quadruple the inequality that in the search for employment, in comparison to those with bachelor's degree who only face 4% unemployment. So this is something that we want to combat because there's a large stigma in employers for low or high skilled workers versus low skilled workers, which we want to completely get rid of, as we want to like provide jobs for all those who need it, despite the bias that there is for education levels, because we want to fix this inequality in Kingston especially. So just to move on a little bit from this, I wanted to talk about where we are now. So during the pandemic in March 2020, Kingston's unemployment rate hit 12%. It has since recovered a bit, but 6.8% of Kingston residents are unemployed, and recovery has begun to stall at a national level. So we expect to fully, we expect will fully be represented in Kingston. Many residents are also out of the labor force due to a lack of interest, due to not a lack of interest, but to a lack of opportunity. So there are simply fewer available jobs than there are job seekers. The problem of unemployment will not go away on its own until there are many or more available jobs than there are people in want of jobs. So Kingston is a thriving community, but it still experiences the kind of racialized unemployment and hidden unemployment that most cities do. With all this in mind, we have come with a couple of proposals for you today, which we seek to begin to answer the question of how we can start creatively thinking about future job creation problem in Kingston, or creation program in Kingston.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elena. Thank you again so much for coming. I'm going to present our actual proposals. So our first branch of our proposal is Care for the Community, which is aimed at creating care jobs in the Kingston community. Our first issue or community need that we would like to address is having more affordable housing and more resources to improve housing, especially for marginalized groups. 35% of the Hispanic population in Kingston are severely cost-burdened renters, and 22% of households, renters, and owners in Kingston have at least one severe housing problem. So our proposal is to employ a task force to bring buildings up to code through community outreach. It's important to note that this task force will not act as an enforcement program. Instead, it is based in community outreach. It will employ large amounts of people to help connect residents with necessary resources and services to remedy issues. Housing liaisons can help residents resolve issues without being fined or going to jail. We also would like to help Kingston residents weatherize their homes. This is especially beneficial for low-income residents as it makes houses more energy efficient, thus lowering energy costs. It also, lead and other forms of testing also protects residents' health and safety, thus decreasing out-of-pocket insurance costs. We've identified an existing resource in the Kingston community already, the Kingston City Land Bank. They flip foreclosed homes and make them available at affordable prices. Kingston Cares can work with this group and create paid jobs for current volunteers. This work can also include salvaging material for community use. We also would like to address the issue that there are few local jobs and also that Kingston is not a very pedestrian-friendly city. But our proposal is to directly employ people to beautify and maintain their community through neighborhood cleanups, gardening, planting trees, creating murals, and redesigning streets. Murals both beautify the city and provide employment for local artists. We also would like to use the design approach Complete Streets, which requires streets to be accessible to all residents of the area. They are designed to have gathering spaces, bike lanes, public transportation lanes, and walking space for pedestrians. The third community need that we would like to address is assistance for the large community of underserved elderly people and people with mental health issues. 20.7% of the Ulster County community lives with a disability, a higher percentage than the national average. 6.1% of the Ulster County community has a disability that does not allow them to live independently. In a Mid-Hudson Regional Health Survey, 58% of those in Ulster County that reported that they had experienced a mental health condition said that they had not visited a mental health provider in the past 12 months. Our proposal is companionship jobs to support these groups while providing employment. Companions can also connect those suffering from mental health issues with existing mental health support resources. This program works in symbiosis with Kingston Rise Up and their efforts to expand mental health resources and lower police involvement in mental health crises. The second branch of our proposal is aimed at addressing the environmental needs of the Kingston community. So we worked off of the work that Kingston Land Trust has already done to sort of understand the needs of the community with the environment. The Kingston Land Trust is a nonprofit organization that began in 2019, and it aims to conserve land in and around Kingston while also enacting policies and practices which aim to reduce disparities in the Kingston community. Many of their existing projects and initiatives can be supported through a Green New Deal, making Kingston a more environmentally sound and just community. They have multiple really amazing initiatives, like the Land for Food initiative, which supports local farming and provides healthy food for the community. Comida y Tierra, which is, they host educational Spanish-speaking dinners on the environment. This is a very important initiative for our proposal because they have been able to identify volunteer translators who attend relevant public meetings, making them accessible to those in Kingston who speak Spanish as their dominant language. Kingston Cares, through our accessibility initiative, can create the opportunity for this volunteer network to find paid jobs, both translating educational materials and as interpreters at our points of service. The Kingston Land Trust has also created an edible stream buffer, which has helped reduce erosion and improve stream health. It also provides edible plants to the community. And finally, the land matching portal matches landowners and land seekers to do environmental good. This is also a very important initiative for our proposal because they can help us identify land that might be used for community gardens. So our first community need that we would like to address is increasing community land ownership and food security. Our proposal is the development of community gardens across Kingston. We want to make sure that our locations are selected based on environmental justice framework. We also want to utilize community gardens as an educational resource alongside food production. We will work with the Kingston Department of Parks and Recreation and the Kingston Land Trust to determine suitable locations in the city's parks to develop community gardens. We want to ensure that areas largely populated by underserved communities are given first priority in the development of community gardens. We also would like to reutilize brownfields and abandoned lots. We also would like to implement a food army employment program. Jobs in this program would include managing greenhouses, processing and delivering food from local farms and community gardens to public food programs, and employment at composting facilities. Public food programs often are unable to use local produce due to processing requirements. Food processing centers would allow public food programs to accept local and sustainable produce. Local produce is also a more sustainable option due to lower carbon emissions. Use of local produce in school food programs also offers youth health benefits and can be used as a food justice education opportunity. Composting facilities would be able to utilize food scraps from public food programs, local businesses, and restaurants, which would help them reach zero waste goals. It can then be utilized again as the finished product as compost by community gardens and local farms who give produce to public food programs.
Hi, my name is Fiona, and I'm going to be presenting on our last section, which is accessibility. So far in our presentation, we've filled you in on our vision of the elimination of involuntary unemployment in Kingston. And we've shown you the specific programs that we have created that we think would help address this. But what's really important here is that in order to fully eliminate involuntary unemployment, all these jobs have to be fully accessible to all Kingston residents. A job guarantee means a job for anyone who wants one, and that necessitates proper accessibility. So our first idea for how to do this is to make transportation more accessible in Kingston. The current transportation infrastructure in Kingston is really, there's a bus system, but the public transportation network basically focuses on getting people back and forth between Kingston and other neighboring towns. So we think that there needs to be significant public transportation infrastructure running throughout Kingston, connecting the different parts of the town in order for the jobs that we create to be truly accessible. So the graph here shows the means of transportation to work in Kingston. 70%, over 70% of people indicated that they drive alone to work, and then an additional 11.2% carpool. So cars are a really significant part of getting to work in Kingston. And we think that creating a public transportation network by expanding bus routes with a zero bus fare for residents would really help eliminate this barrier to full unemployment. We also want to create a more walkable city, which entails creating jobs through creating sidewalks, prioritizing local jobs through beautification and community gardens. And these ideas would both directly create jobs as well as improve accessibility to other jobs. Many of our proposals work to create opportunities within the community, and creating things like better sidewalks and local community gardens can also make sure that residents are able to get to their jobs. And then by making Kingston more accessible to people without cars, it would also have a green component, which really is wonderful. Next slide. So Kingston's Hispanic and Latino population has grown significantly in recent years, but limited English speakers are really suffering disproportionately. These communities have become essential to Kingston's makeup, but there's still a negative association between the percentage of limited English speaking households and life expectancy, as well as median household income. So we need to make sure that the jobs that we create are fully accessible to limited English speakers. We want to create educational resources that are multilingual, and we also want to make sure that there's translators at all points of service. So that would be able to employ a significant amount of people in translation to make sure that all of the jobs that we've talked about previously in our proposal are fully accessible to all residents without, regardless of a language barrier. And lastly, we want to make sure that all of our jobs are accessible to parents. So in our research, we found that in comparison with both the general population and families, single mothers are significantly more likely to be below the poverty line, especially those with young children. Increased economic insecurity among mothers affects both mothers and children. So we propose that mothers should be prioritized for child and daycare positions, so they're able to both watch their children and have well-paid employment for doing so. This fits in with our proposal of green education program. And also jobs that have flexible hours like greenhouse work that aren't a traditional 9 to 5 can also be a really great opportunity, especially if larger after school programs are created, to make sure that people who are involuntarily unemployed with children have full access to jobs and don't have to worry about who's taking care of their children. Yeah, next slide, please. So through our proposal, we want to aim to create 800 jobs to meet the needs of Kingstonians, securing the right to employment while simultaneously improving housing, public transportation, maternal health, environmental efforts, and the local economy. So far we've proposed a citywide public bus system, childcare and companionship jobs, working with the Kingston Land Trust, housing beautification and community garden development, as well as creating a food army employment program. So 800 jobs is a big promise, and we know that, but our program is committed to providing jobs for all and eliminating involuntary unemployment, which means finding work for at least 800 people in the Kingston area, especially for those in underserved groups.
So as you can see, there are some commonalities between the projects we have proposed, such as working with nonprofits and existing community organizations, as well as creating jobs that don't compete with the private sector, but instead meet unfulfilled employment needs and community issues that aren't resolved by private businesses. So like our list of projects is only a starting point for the kinds of jobs we can create with the Green Jobs Guarantee for Kingston. So as I said before, we want to work with nonprofits and existing community organizations to create jobs that hopefully add, in addition, accessibility to these private sector employment opportunities, because we seek to build a bridge between two of them, and we seek to eliminate involuntary unemployment and truly get all these people who are seeking jobs a job. Policy with people in mind. So the community and history-based approach to fit the needs of Kingston is one that we choose to follow throughout our proposal. We like to look at the history of Kingston and truly who is in need and what's really important for the people of Kingston. And we seek to secure the right to employment with decent and accessible opportunities. So everyone deserves the opportunity to support themselves and their families through employment, and that is what we seek to elaborate on further in our proposal that we are working on. So we'd love your input. So what do you want to see in a Green Jobs Guarantee for Kingston? We'd love to see what your thoughts are on what we have just proposed, and we'd love to see what else you think we can elaborate on. I'll pass it on to Sedania.
Yeah, I'm here to facilitate Q&A. The first sort of question I have is for the community. Um, we enjoy being outside. When you go outside and it's a sunny day, it makes you feel good. But how can you enjoy being outside without having the correct access to it? Um, Fiona mentioned earlier creating sidewalks, bike lanes. That includes stuff like that, public trails. Nonprofit organizations like the Kingston Land Trust Co. and the Esopus Creek Conservancy. Those are two different nonprofit organizations that protect the natural landscapes and also allow for people to go kind of explore and see what it's like and become educated on the environment. So being outside improves both the physical well-being and the mental well-being of the community. So my question for y'all would be, how do we give equal access to the citizens of Kingston community to the natural environment? And what would that look like to y'all when implemented into the real world? Because a lot of times we talk about different things, it's much easier said than done. So what would that look like when really implemented in Kingston? So, yeah, open the floor up to anybody.
And if you could please use the hand raise function or use the chat to ask the questions. So Leanne is, I'll help maybe some of these, or so Daniel, if you want to monitor that as well. But in this format, we can't see everyone. So just please use either chat or raise your hand. So Daniel, it's floor is yours.
So Leanne asked, are these unpaid jobs or paid? If paid, where do you get the money from to pay for these jobs? So it depends on what job you're speaking about. If you're speaking about like the environment, which I just spoke about, nonprofit organizations, that's how people get paid through that. If you'd like to elaborate, Miss Usher, about what jobs you're speaking about. Oh, and Elena also has something to say.
I think one of the motivations of our project is also to make unpaid volunteer jobs paid. And what was the second half of the question? It's paid where do you, so the theory or sort of the like base of our proposal is that we would have federal funding at some point through a Green New Deal.
And I'm happy also to clarify, the vision was if there is support that will come down to our community through these various federal initiatives, do we have a plan in a sense, right, to respond? Of course, that doesn't preclude moving forward with some of that work, even while we wait for federal action. But the hope is that this is all paid, good work and well-paid work.
Okay.
Somebody had, I saw a comment. Julia, please respond.
Okay, I unmuted. Hi, I'm the executive director of the Kingston Land Trust. So I really appreciate you highlighting all of our initiatives that are working towards a lot of the goals that you've identified. And we definitely could use some more folks helping with especially our Green Line initiative. So that's the public trail and bike lane system that we partner on with the city of Kingston and Ulster County. And it often needs maintenance, as you can imagine. And you were speaking about collaborating with the Parks Department, and that's something that we're in touch with the Parks Department, and we are but it's a constant struggle to have enough capacity, both from the city and from our organization, to maintain the plantings and the environment and do cleanups on the trail. So if there were funding, which is of course always the problem for this type of support, then we could definitely host folks to do a lot of that maintenance work. And then, as you mentioned, we do give a sort of a stipend or compensate people who are doing interpretation and translation in Spanish. And we encourage that when we work with partner organizations, and that is something that we would also really, be able to support. And let's see. Oh, then back in at the beginning when our organization started, I think back in under when Rebecca Martin was the executive director, I think back in 2011 or so, we had a program called Dig Kids that was, employing youth to do urban agriculture. And then that ended up transitioning and morphing over to the Kingston YMCA Farm Project. And they're currently employing youth to do urban agriculture and design and beautification throughout the community. And we have hosted them and helped pay for their compensation at the African Burial Ground and at our community forest at Grove Street. So we're already doing some of that work, and certainly there's a lot of opportunities for us to partner with other organizations to continue to host folks in land stewardship jobs, and also land design and communications and outreach, especially in Spanish. And then there's one more area, the housing development. We just created a report with BARD MBA in Sustainability program on creating eco-dwellings, how land trusts and housing organizations might work together to develop eco-dwellings for people who are unhoused in Kingston. And part of that proposal is to generate green jobs around that housing development. So I'd be happy to share that with you. It's almost finished.
That I'd like to open the floor up to Arthur. I believe he had a question. If you'd like to ask it, I can ask it for you. He said, are you aware of similar and successful projects around the world on which you can base plans? I'd like to open the floor to that. If anybody would like to.
I wanted to pitch into both two questions by Guy and Arthur. So yeah, all the jobs that we are proposing and we seek to create are supposed to be quality jobs that are at least 15 hours minimum wage and have partial benefits. Hopefully, we elaborated more in our proposal about the cost and where this funding would actually come from and the specifics. We didn't really include it. We didn't really include it in these slides, but yes, that's the assumption we're under as well. And we are aware of successful projects that are similar to these. Actually, in this course, we all did individual projects on job guarantee programs around the world. Me specifically, I worked on the Plan Jefes y Jefes de Hogares Desocupados. It's a job guarantee program in Argentina that seek to combat unemployment after the economic crisis of 2001. So it was very particular to Argentina, and it also provided monthly income for households or for the heads of households, particularly men and women. But it really benefited the women and the mothers of households, and it improved unemployment greatly, and it got Argentina's economy back on track. But many other of my classmates in this project as well put a lot of their insight from their projects, and maybe they would like to elaborate a little more. But we do have we did use some of those frameworks to work on our project.
Yeah, we all did research on different job guarantee programs around the world. And I think that it's important to just bring it back really quickly to the fact that Kingston has benefited from a program like this in the past. The Works Progress Administration was highly successful in Kingston, and it was really popular during the Great Depression. So it does seem really out there, what we're proposing, but there is historical precedent, not even 100 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds good. Many of my classmates, we've all been working on different cases around the world and how we can secure employment for a lot of people who need it, because people are always going to need jobs because people need money, So But I would like to see Ms. Leanne asked, she said, what do y'all think about using local currency to finance initiatives? She said the local shops and businesses might give vouchers to use in their stores, which would benefit if you're creating a mural or bringing tourists to the town from trail beautification. But I would like to kind of form that question because Guy also inputted that Kingston Current is a local currency. So maybe we can put these together and ask, how do we, what's the word I'm looking for? How do we push that? You know what I mean? How do we push the local currency out there and kind of put it on the front line and kind of have people more involved and know what it is and have tourists come and be involved with that to kind of put those two together? If anybody would like to answer that or has any ideas. Yeah. And if not, that's fine, you know, guys. If not, that's all right. Don't
I
even
could-
care about it.
In fairness, I should step in. I should say it. This was we didn't discuss any of other alternative financing options in this class. That this was the focus was really on job creation with the specific community needs in mind and the specific people who are marginalized and have the greatest job insecurity. So it's a bit of different scope of the project. So different financing options, can be considered. As we were talking, as we were saying a moment ago, communities are already responding, right? We're not waiting for federal action to come down. We already have institutions who are addressing social needs. And so by whatever means we're able to fortify these institutions, that's very important. We're trying to situate this project in the kind of new thinking, or hopefully new thinking, that seems to be shaping up in different corners of the political spectrum, and that's focusing on direct public investment and public employment. Okay, Angie had a very interesting question as well. I think, okay, yeah, I think Angie's next. So if students want to respond to how was the procedure, and I just want to say for people who joined us late, this was an inverted project. The students really planned it out, mapped it out from the beginning. And they, with our guidance, they developed the rubrics that they wanted to study. And so you will be best suited to explaining your process of identifying, right, the needs. Was there any outreach to the community of Kingston, especially minorities, to see what jobs would be of their benefit? Anyone from the Kingston team?
Before we did this final presentation, we did a midpoint presentation where we were doing community outreach. Specifically, my group focused on historical context. So we kind of just went through like Kingston's history, like seeking the Kingston Library and stuff like that. However, the local, I think it was a local outreach group, did a lot more of that. They have a lot more data, and I think they themselves contacted nonprofits, and they kind of focus on contacting legislators or policymakers, I think a little bit more of Kingston, in order to like see what policies they could actually form and like enact, and which were successful. I'm not sure if they really reached out to the affected target groups. However, I feel like one of them may be able to answer your question more. We kind of just focus on looking at the data mainly, and especially because of the pandemic, we couldn't really do as much community outreach as we wanted to, and we also didn't really want to burden the people of Kingston because we were working on a very like a shaky timeline for a little bit, but we focus on data majorly. But I think like we have a little bit of time for the proposal that we might be able to, but I'm not sure. Maybe somebody else has something else to add.
I guess I really just want to emphasize that this is the beginning of a conversation. We have done a bit of outreach. We did a lot of data collection, but I think a lot of what we're doing here today is trying to do more community outreach. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. I would like to let Guy touch on a comment that he made and then pivot into the next question. So Guy made an insightful comment. I would like for him to elaborate on that.
You could read it if maybe Guy is not.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Move on. Move on to the next question.
yeah,
Yep.
I just lost him. But oh yeah, we could just go to the next question.
Because they connect very nicely.
Yeah, the next question is on infrastructure. So when people think about infrastructure, the common concept of infrastructure comes up with roads, police, and firefighters. But how does that translate into a peace of mind at home? Because there's more to lives than just guns and fire hoses, and I'm sure people know that. So the question for y'all would be, how can Kingston guarantee jobs of infrastructure that go further than the basic concept of police and firemen and teachers and incorporate caretakers and the health of citizens in their homes?
I think this is an invitation for folks to share their thoughts from the community. And maybe if I can add to Daniel's question, when we think about stakeholders, can you help the students identify additional stakeholders that exist, but also additional infrastructure that either exists or we need to build to be able to provide this kind of support that the students are outlining? We were talking earlier, Julia was mentioning about the work that they're doing and that they just need a lot more helping hands. But do we have the physical capacity to do the work, or do we also need to be thinking about building additional infrastructure and physical investments to do the kind of work that they're outlining? Yeah, Thomasine, if you would please share.
So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Thomasine Oliphant. I'm the director of the Ulster County Office of Employment and Training. And I think your presentation was wonderful. Thank you all so much. I was very interested in your idea of the Food Army Employment Program. And I know you discussed it, but I'd like to, just discuss that even more and just gain more insight because, if my office could be able to help support implementing that, that would be incredible. We just have to, talk about it more and see how we could do that. So I just like to, just continue that conversation. If you guys have any more thoughts or any ideas further.
I can talk about it. I think that really what sort of switched in my head for me with this program when I was trying to think about it was making sure that labor is prioritized over technology, that all of these centers, all of these processing and composting facilities should be labor intensive over technologically advanced to provide more employment. I also, I think that what was really important to me too was making sure that there's this disconnect where there's all of this local produce and there's all these public food programs and they're unable to use each other. But with composting facilities and with processing centers, that can become more of a full circle.
And I also wanted to point out, I appreciate, your focus on green jobs and some of us here, and I see Guy and Susan as well, we've all been working together to help provide a greener and cleaner Kingston community. I don't know if you guys are aware of some efforts that we already have, or what Susan has with Citizens for Local Power, with their Green Jobs Internship Program, and our Green Careers Coalition. Some of the efforts that we have already started with, helping to working with economic development, as well, with trying to help to foster more green jobs, as well as encourage more individuals into green employment opportunities. So I appreciate your focus and with wanting to elevate that. And it's great that we can continue this conversation here with you all about the importance of green jobs.
I would like to ask if, because you said you Susan and Guy, I would like to ask, yeah, Susan, if she wanted to elaborate on green jobs to follow up with that, if she put her hand up.
Thank you guys for including me and for all this interesting work that you've been doing. I think you've identified some really interesting connections there. And as Elena was saying, the circular economy around food and gardens and so forth is very interesting, and something that I think already has some start in Kingston with the land bank and all that could really be built out. Also the environment, and sometimes it is just a possibility to take a bus, over to the Hudson or something that can give people more access to all of that. So you're looking at it in a very comprehensive way, which I love. And with regard to the green jobs and what Citizens for Local Power is doing, I mean, I will say that I was heartened recently to see some document from the federal government looking at housing as infrastructure. Somehow that doesn't often come up. People talk about infrastructure, and it seems all about how do you get somewhere in your car. And if we want to, undo that to some extent, we have to think about infrastructure differently. So what we've been doing is we've created what we're calling the Empower Kingston Green Jobs Internship. We have one starting very soon, actually, on the 23rd of May, working with local contractors to learn sort of around in the broad sense, what could you do in the field of green jobs? And it turns out that it's very diverse and quite technical. Although there's a part of it that's really about just hands-on, being a good carpenter, that's part of it. Or being able to use a hammer and know how to do plumbing and electricity, that's part of it, or solar. But a lot of it is learning how to bring a home up to new environmental standards. And there's a lot of political work that's going on there about what those standards should be. Should they be raised for new homes, et cetera? But what we're finding is that there's a mismatch between the need of people in the business and young people, or other people actually, who probably maybe have a limited or restricted idea of what is involved in this field, or the kinds of work they could be doing, or the possibilities of going into your own business. So there's a big educational piece that needs to happen there. So you might think about how to build in, somebody mentioned I think maybe it was Julia mentioned, the YMCA farm project, but there's a need for people to understand that green jobs or green collar jobs, is the way of the future. It has to be for a lot of people for us to thrive.
Okay, that was very insightful. I'd like to follow up with Guy on that real quick, and then we can we have a great conversation going on in the chat. I'd like to have Guy touch upon what she just said and kind of,
Yeah, well, I find it always very difficult to argue with Susan when she's right. So I don't do that. I always avoid that. And I guess I want to say that I'm trying not to make my voice larger than all of yours. I want to hear you guys. And that's why I've been primarily communicating in the chat. I'm very respectful of me being a guest in your room here. With that said, it does seem to me that there are lots of opportunities for us to explore the idea and the definition of green jobs in a more broad way. And we've certainly been talking about that and thinking about that. And I think sort of cross-pollinating all of the different projects that you've been talking about, from food distribution and the actual growing of produce and food, which is really just a seasonal opportunity, to creating housing, to providing transportation, to growing networks in Kingston. And so I like this expansive kind of approach that you folks are taking. And I'm really interested in continuing the conversation.
I also want to quickly add that I don't know if you guys all realize that you guys are addressing social determinants of health through this. So it's really, really incredible and impressive that you guys are addressing those needs, that you're looking at it in that community-based model and that mindset and really, really tying everything together. So it's very impressive.
I saw Raina put in a great comment saying that a fabulous window of opportunity with Ulster's recently proposed Green New Deal and our proposed task force to bring buildings up to code through community outreach, through via housing liaison, weatherization. I wanted to open it to Evelyn and see if she had any insights to share from being with the Ulster County government. I wanted to see if she had anything insightful to add.
Well, thank you very much. It's really exciting to hear about all of this work that you've done. And I really want to echo what others have said about how you're bringing all these pieces of the community care puzzle together. I really love how you framed it. So one of the initiatives that we are committing to in our Green New Deal plan that we released a couple weeks ago is something similar to the housing liaison work that you're talking about. Actually, I love the way you frame that in terms of the housing liaison. The perspective that I'm looking at, in addition to the potential for a federal jobs guarantee or a civilian conservation corps, I'm come out of the climate change world and am looking at New York State's climate goals under the CLCPA, and we're going to have to renovate virtually every building in New York State in order to meet those goals. And the state is working now on setting timeframes for doing that work and has not really grappled with where the funding is going to come from, but it's a massive effort. And we know in the work that Susan and Thomasine have done with our contractor community, they're already not able to find enough workers to fill the jobs, to do the work at the pace that they have right now. And so we have a really huge workforce development need alongside the employment need that you all have identified. And it's really a puzzle how to put those kind of two problems together and come up with a solution. But I see a really huge need to develop the local capacity to get people into that kind of weatherization work in order to be able to meet those goals of weatherizing every home in the state over the course of the next couple of decades. So I'd love to follow up and talk with you all some more about the ways you're thinking about putting the community pieces together here, because I love how you're thinking about it.
That was great. I wanted to ask if you could expand on the workforce development needs. If you could give us a few examples of that.
Yeah, Thomasine can say more about this too, but in every sector of the economy that we work with, whether it's green buildings and energy contracting, whether it's manufacturing, food production, we're constantly told by employers that they have a hard time finding job candidates and that it's really limiting their ability to grow. And so I think it has to do with how we prepare folks for work. It has to do with what kind of wages and benefits get offered in our entry-level jobs. And it has to do with the accessibility issues that you all have highlighted. And there may be other pieces of it as well in terms of what are people looking for in work, and what kind of work are people prepared for, and what are the barriers to employment, because you know, I think that where individuals may be facing an unemployment problem, workers are really, businesses are really facing an employability problem. And so I think there's some really, some deep community-based work that needs to be done to try to figure out what those barriers are and how we can address them.
I can add on to what Evelyn is sharing, what our conversations with businesses across all sectors is that there's a need for soft skills training as well for prospective employees. So soft skills training, and then just, you know, just the skills that they just don't have the right skills. So, you know, we're currently working with our training provider, SUNY Ulster, Ulster BOCES, to make sure that our training programs are aligned with what the businesses need, making sure that what the skills that they're looking for, that our training programs, that any training programs that are available that are actually training for the skills that these jobs require for individuals to have.
I'm so glad to hear you all talking about the training and educational aspect. That was something that I had worked on previously, but we had decided to move away from a little bit. But like you had said, we had identified Ulster Works and then the SUNY Ulster Green Program as potential resources that we could use. And so I would love to expand upon that, you know, and make sure that there are opportunities for people to get trained, but be paid while they get trained,
Yes.
which I think is what Ulster Works is doing. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so that's our Ulster County Career Center, and we do provide on-the-job training. As you said, that we're able to pay somebody while they're getting training on the job. We do have our young adult employment program, where anyone whose ages between 16 and 24 who may not have their GED or are out of school, we're able to help them get paid training. So any short-term occupational skills training through SUNY Ulster, Ulster BOCES, CDLA, you know, CDL training, we're able to support them. And something differently we did, and especially in response to this pandemic, was really aligning our efforts with Ulster BOCES and SUNY Ulster. So we have a very, very strong partnership. I feel like I talk to them more like coworkers on a daily basis. And it's great because they're doing the work of making sure that their training programs are aligning. And what you had shared about too, touching on the Green Careers Academy, that is that opportunity for some training in green careers. And we did launch their website, our Green New Deal website, where we have training opportunities, and I could drop that in the chat so you guys can see the different training pathways that we met together to identify different pathways that someone could get into a green job and a green career, whether it's through construction, water careers. So there's many different, solar careers. There are many different pathways that you can get into it. And we also even partnered with the unions as well. So I'll throw that in the chat for you guys to explore, so that for your research even further.
Thank you. As time runs down, I would just like to ask one time if any of our guests have any last feedback on community strengths and needs. If anybody would like to add in about that. And then I also wanted to thank all the guests. Just want to make sure, thank everybody for coming. And I wanted to thank my classmates and my group for also putting together a great project. They worked really hard on it. So but I wanted to ask one more time if anybody had any last feedback on community strengths and needs, any of the guests. And if not, that's fine too. If not, that's cool. It's been a long day, but I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. Thank my classmates as well. I'll give y'all a few little seconds if anybody has to put any ideas together or anything like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Sir Daniel. And I also want to thank everyone that has come here today. what what we acutely understand is that our communities have so very many needs, and in fact, the needs, the environmental and social needs, dwarf even the number of people that we have to do them, and the capacity that the physical capacity that we have. And so, in other words, there's more work to do than we have people available to do them. And so during the New Deal, Kingston created 1,500 jobs. We're aiming for 800 jobs. In some ways, it's a smaller scale, much smaller scale, much wealthier communities with many more resources than back in the Depression. But we are also trying to put in the missing piece, the direct employment piece in the puzzle that just seems to be missing in a comprehensive way from the big policy agenda. On the local level, organizations are doing that, doing on-the-job training, youth apprenticeships, various other employment programs, and it is somewhat of a patchwork. And so with these projects, I think the students were trying to identify the concrete specific needs with the folks that can do the work. So I appreciate the feedback. We look forward to circulating this document to you, and hopefully getting your feedback on that as well. And thank you again. Thanks for coming.